Introduction. If your life looked exactly 1 year from now the way it looks today, would that be okay with you? Sit with that question for a second. Same relationships, same body, same bank account, same stress, same reactions to the same people, same thoughts running through your mind on a loop you've heard 1,000 times before. For most people, the honest answer is no. And yet, most people will live exactly that life, not because they don't want something different, but because they don't realize something simple and slightly uncomfortable. Your future is not created by what you want. It's created by who you are. And who you are, every single day, is made up of how you think, how you feel, and how you act, a pattern so automatic, so familiar, that most of us mistake it for just who I am, instead of recognizing it for what it actually is. A habit, rehearsed so many times it has become biology. Today we're going to go deeper into something that sounds almost too simple to be powerful, the idea that to change your future, you don't need a new job, a new relationship, or a new city. You need a new personality. Not a fake one, not a performance, a genuinely new way of thinking, feeling, and showing up in the world, built deliberately, on purpose, instead of inherited by accident from your past. We'll talk about why your personality creates your personal reality. We'll talk about the difference between living by memory and living by intention. We'll explore the idea that your body can't always tell the difference between an experience you're having and one you're vividly creating in your own mind, and why that single fact may be the most useful tool you own. We'll look at real stories of people who changed their inner world so thoroughly that their outer world had no choice but to follow. And by the end, you'll have a clear, practical framework, not just an idea, but an actual method, for stepping out of your past and into a future you've consciously chosen. Let's begin. Part 1. You are a pattern, not a fixed identity. Here's something worth questioning. When you say, "This is just how I am," what are you actually describing? In almost every case, you're describing a pattern, a familiar way of thinking, a familiar emotional reaction, a familiar set of behaviors you've repeated so many times that it now feels like identity. But a pattern repeated long enough simply feels permanent. It isn't. Your personality is essentially 3 things working together: how you think, how you act, and how you feel. Most people wake up and immediately step into the same set of thoughts they had yesterday. They check the same worries. They predict the same problems. They react to the same triggers in the same way they always have. Their body, trained by years of repetition, produces the same emotional chemistry, and that familiar chemistry then influences the next thought, which produces the same emotion again. It becomes a closed loop. Thought creates feeling, feeling creates thought, and around it goes, day after day, year after year. Here's the deeper layer most people never consider. Your body keeps a kind of chemical memory of your most familiar emotional states. Over years of repetition, it begins to crave those states the way it might crave a substance, not because they feel good, necessarily, but because they feel familiar, and the body equates familiar with safe. This is why someone can consciously want to feel calm, and yet some part of them keeps generating anxiety. It isn't weakness, it's chemical conditioning. The body has simply been trained, over thousands of repetitions, to predict and produce a particular emotional state, almost independent of what's actually happening around them. This is why so many people can want change desperately and still stay exactly the same. Wanting something new with your conscious mind, while your body keeps producing yesterday's emotional chemistry underneath, is like pressing the gas and the brake at the same time. Nothing moves. Or worse, you move in tiny circles, mistaking motion for progress. Part 2. Living by memory versus living by intention. There are really only 2 ways a human being can move through life: by memory or by intention. Living by memory means your nervous system is constantly referencing the past to decide how to respond to the present. A certain tone of voice reminds your body of a childhood argument, and suddenly you're defensive before you even know why. A certain kind of opportunity reminds your nervous system of a past failure, so you talk yourself out of trying. Your decisions, your relationships, even your health, become an echo of everything that has already happened to you. You are, in a very real sense, creating tomorrow out of yesterday, using the past as a blueprint for a future that hasn't even happened yet. Living by intention is different. It means you are no longer simply reacting to old emotional residue. You are consciously choosing, in this moment, how you want to think, feel, and act, based not on what has already happened, but on who you have decided to become. This requires something specific. A clear, defined intention. Vague hope. I just want things to be better, rarely moves the needle, because the body and brain don't know what to rehearse. But a clear, specific picture of the person you're becoming and the life you're building gives your nervous system something concrete to practice. Clarity of intention is the starting point. Without it, everything that follows has nothing to aim at. This isn't about pretending or forcing positivity. It's about recognizing that emotions aren't just reactions to your life. They can also be rehearsals for the life you're building. Every time you deliberately generate an elevated emotional state, genuine gratitude, calm, confidence, independent of your current circumstances, you are teaching your body, on a chemical level, what that future state feels like. This matters more than people realize, because the body responds to emotion, not to mere thought. A thought without an accompanying feeling tends to stay just an idea. But a thought paired with a genuinely felt emotion becomes an experience, and your body learns from experience far more efficiently than it learns from intellectual understanding alone. Part 3. The body doesn't know the difference. Here is the mechanism that makes all of this more than wishful thinking. Your brain and nervous system respond, to a remarkable degree, the same way whether you are having an experience in the external world or vividly, emotionally imagining one in your inner world. This is well documented in how athletes train. A person who mentally rehearses a physical movement in precise, repeated detail builds measurable strength and skill in the very same muscles used during actual practice, without moving a single limb. The brain doesn't fully distinguish between "this is really happening" and "I am vividly, repeatedly imagining this happening with full sensory and emotional detail." This means the quiet, internal rehearsal of a new personality is not fantasy. It's construction. When you sit quietly and clearly imagine yourself responding to a difficult situation with steadiness instead of panic, or speaking up with confidence instead of shrinking back, and you allow yourself to actually feel that steadiness or confidence in your body as you imagine it, you are doing more than daydreaming. You're rehearsing new neural connections and, with enough repetition, new chemical and hormonal patterns, literally giving your body a preview of a future state before any outside circumstance has proven it's possible. This is also where surrender plays an important role, even though it sounds like the opposite of effort. If you spend your rehearsal time anxiously checking whether it's working, attached to exactly how and when the change will show up, you keep your nervous system tethered to lack, to the felt sense that the new state hasn't arrived yet. The deeper practice is to genuinely feel the new state is already true in that quiet moment, and then release your grip on controlling how or when it unfolds in the outer world. Tension and forcing keep you anchored to the old personality. Genuine, felt belief, held loosely, is what allows the new one to take root. Part 4. Real stories of personalities transformed. Let's ground this in real life, because ideas only matter if they actually work. Consider a man in his mid-40s who spent 2 decades as, by his own description, an angry person. Quick temper, easily triggered, a long pattern of damaged relationships at work and at home. He didn't wake up one day and decide to be nicer. That kind of surface-level effort rarely lasts. What actually shifted things was a daily practice of sitting quietly each morning, setting a clear, specific intention for how he wanted to respond that day, and then deliberately rehearsing, in detail, how a calm, grounded version of himself would handle the exact situations that used to set him off: a frustrating email, a disagreement with his spouse, a delay at work. He imagined the scenario, and he imagined the feeling of steadiness in his chest instead of the familiar heat of anger, over and over, until that steadier response stopped feeling like acting and started feeling like simply who he was. Within a year, his wife described him as a different man, not because his circumstances changed, but because the personality meeting those circumstances had changed, chemistry and all. Or consider a woman who had been told for years, by doctors and by her own inner voice, that she was simply a worrier, someone whose anxious, catastrophizing mind was just a fixed part of her makeup, and whose body, as a result, lived in a near constant state of low-grade stress that her doctor connected to several of her ongoing health issues. She began consciously practicing a different internal state every single day, not denying her fears, but actively generating the genuine feeling of trust and capability in quiet moments before her mind had the chance to spiral, then carrying that felt sense into her day. At first it felt artificial, even forced. But she kept at it, treating each session as practice rather than proof. Months later, colleagues who had known her for years began asking what had changed. Her health markers improved that same year, and so did her business, not coincidentally, because a calmer nervous system was now running the show, instead of a chronically stressed one quietly working against her in the background. And then there are the smaller, equally meaningful transformations. The person who decided, deliberately, to become someone who follows through, rehearsed that identity daily, and within a year had built the consistent habits they'd failed at for a decade. The person who decided to become someone who speaks up, practiced the feeling of quiet confidence each morning, and found themselves, almost without noticing, no longer the quiet one in the room. None of these people waited for their circumstances to change first. They became a different personality first, in the privacy of a few quiet minutes a day, and the circumstances reorganized themselves around that new identity. Part 5. A practical framework for becoming someone new. You don't need to overhaul your entire life overnight, and frankly, trying to will set you up to fail. Real change happens through small, consistent, deliberate repetition, built on 4 simple elements. First, clarity. Get specific about exactly who you're becoming and exactly what pattern you're leaving behind. Not vague wishing, a clear, defined picture. Second, rehearsal. Each day, ideally in a quiet moment before the noise of the day pulls you back into old patterns, mentally walk through how this new version of you thinks, speaks, and responds, especially in the situations that used to trip you up. Third, feeling. Don't just picture it, feel it. Let your body experience, right now, the calm, the confidence, the steadiness you're rehearsing, as though it's already real. This is the step most people skip, and it's the step that actually signals the body to change. Fourth, release. Let go of needing to know exactly how or when this will show up in your outer life. Your job is the inner rehearsal. The outer unfolding tends to follow its own timeline, and gripping it tightly only keeps you anchored to the very state you're trying to leave behind. Then, throughout your day, watch for the small moments where the old pattern tries to take over and gently, without self-judgment, choose differently. Not perfectly, not every time, but consistently enough that the new pathway gets stronger than the old one. Change isn't about a single dramatic moment of transformation. It's about thousands of small choices, repeated daily, until the new personality is simply the personality that shows up, automatically, without a fight. Conclusion. Your future is not waiting for better circumstances. It's waiting for a different version of you to show up and meet it. Every person we talked about today proved the same quiet truth. When you change the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you act, consistently, deliberately, on purpose, your outer life eventually has no choice but to reorganize itself around that new identity. Not because of luck, not because of magic, because the personality creating your decisions, your relationships, and your daily choices has genuinely become someone new, one quiet, deliberate rehearsal at a time. So here's the question worth carrying with you after this video ends. If your personality today is creating your life today, what personality would it take to create the life you actually want? And are you willing to start practicing that, clearly, with feeling, and without gripping the outcome, starting now, before the world gives you any proof that it's working? You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to start choosing, today, a little differently than yesterday. Do that consistently enough, and one day you'll look up and realize the life around you has quietly become unrecognizable, in the best possible way. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until next time, choose deliberately, feel it fully, and watch what begins to change.